Well, welcome. First of all, I'd like to recommend that those are in the back of the room, please come up. And for those of you online, it's a packed room because we have food and liquor, and we're sorry you're not here, but we're having a really good time. Stick with us. We have a TikTok video of someone getting a colonoscopy. Yeah, we're having trouble loading the TikTok video, but any minute now. Dr. Schoen is going to show us what it's like to dance through one. Yeah. I'm Deb Bruner, and I'm really here to do introductions of this extremely important study. It's been years in the making. It has major policy implications for the United States. During COVID, when people delayed their screening, we really wish we had had the results of this study to know that it was safe to go to 10 years instead of 5. I know most of you that are here already know something about the trial, and our speakers here will tell you much more. But you know, as NRG oncology, as community sites, as LAPS, these are extremely important studies as we move forward trying to make things more convenient for patients. It's also critical for things, if you think about it, our rural patients. This would be a huge change, a sea change from making people come in every 5 years to every 10 if we show that there is equivalence in these two arms. So extremely important study. I welcome all of you that are here. I thank all of you that have opened it, are willing to open it, and are also here to have conversations about if there are any challenges that you're facing, because I know that this extremely dedicated team will do everything they can and bend over backwards to try to make this open for you. I have one slide up that just says be a recruitment hero. There are many ways to do this. Please share the information at your site with your GI docs, with the patients, with your patient advocates. Go forth. Again, the team has done a heroic job, but there's always more to do and always more people to share with. And with a 9,500 patient study, we need all the help we can to reach accrual in a very timely way. Also, when you see us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, we appreciate your likes, but I've said this before, a like doesn't get us shared. Please share the information. Don't just like us, although we love you all for doing that. My next joy is to introduce the PI of this study, who is the champion and emperor of screening. The work Dr. Schoen has done to get this up and running is nothing short of heroic. Hercules did things that were easier than getting this study open, and everything he's doing to try to make it accrue quickly is critical. Dr. Schoen is the head of gastroenterology at the University of Pittsburgh, and he's our hero. Rocky, come on up.
Thank you very much, Deb. It is a pleasure to be here. We really have a very capable team, and I look forward to your hearing from them. The title of this opening remark by me is that FORTE is a national priority. That's a big statement, but I think I can back it up. Why do I say that? FORTE is about adenomatous polyps. These are polyps that appear very, very commonly. How commonly? Well, this graph shows the bluish colors are men, the grayish colors are women by different ethnicities, by age. I think you can see the ethnicities don't make that much difference really in the incidence, but what's very clear is if you look at age, let's say 50 to 54, the second group of column, you see men are around 30 to 40% prevalence, women between 20 and 30%, and it just goes up from there. If you look at 65 to 69, you see men in the 50% range, women close to 40%. So why is this a national priority? Because these polyps are everywhere. They're extremely common. Now, FORTE is about what we call surveillance colonoscopy. That is, we find a polyp, and then we ask this very simple question: hey, when should I come back? When do I need my next one? And the reason why this is so important is that surveillance encompasses about 25% of the 15 million colonoscopies that are done every year in the United States. So, 3 to 4 million people this pertains to in a very real way. The demand for surveillance colonoscopy is going to increase. Why do I say that? Well, fortunately, screening is increasing. So the more colonoscopy that we do, the more screening that we do, the more adenomas we're going to find. Similarly, there's something called the adenoma detection rate, which I'll explain to you, but that is going to result in more found adenomas in people undergoing colonoscopy. The adenoma detection rate is a measure of how often an endoscopist finds adenomas in the colon. Now, I think you can understand intuitively, if you leave adenomas behind and they have the potential to turn into cancer, that if we watch a cohort of people over time, we might expect to see more cancers in the group of people who have adenomas left behind in the colon. And therefore, you see this thing called interval cancers. And this is a study that was done at Kaiser and looks at adenoma detection rate and the risk of interval colon cancer, that is, colon cancer after having a colonoscopy before the next one is due. And what you can see in that box, the top quintile, which is about 7 to 19%, that's the standard that we're comparing to. And if you see of the quintile adenoma detection rate, as you go up, quintile 2, 19 to 23, et cetera, up to quintile 5, 33 to 52%, the risk of interval cancer goes down. How much does it go down? Well, at the top quintile, it's 50%. So a 50% reduction in getting cancer with the highest quintile of detection. And in fact, that detection rate is from 2012 at Kaiser. You can see Q1 through Q5. In 2017, they looked at their quintiles as they started to push people to find more adenomas. And what you can see is the prevalence of the finding of adenomas is going up. Quintile 5 is now 50 to 79%. Even quintile 1, the lowest quintile, has gone up from 15 to 32%. So more and more adenomas means more and more surveillance colonoscopy exams. FORTE is about finding the best timing for repeat colonoscopy after 1 or 2 small benign polyps removed during colonoscopy. And right now, we really don't know what the best timing should be. I'm sorry, hold on. There we go. FORTE will help determine when surveillance colonoscopies exams should occur, and that's why FORTE is a very high priority nationally. With that, I will stop and turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Duker, for our next talk.
Thank you. All right, just make sure that my slides, there we go. So hi everyone, my name is Jeff Duker. I am a gastroenterologist at the University of Pittsburgh and the protocol co-chair of this study. Great to be here. So why is a partnership between gastroenterologists and NRG needed? Well, we really need to find the potential participants. The gastroenterologists are going to know where these patients are. So as Dr. Schoen mentioned, there are 15 million screening colonoscopies per year, and he was just reviewing that even a conservative estimate is that 30% capture non-advanced adenomas. Therefore, there's a huge amount of people that can potentially qualify for FORTE getting colonoscopies every single year. So the key to really partnering with the GI practice, I think, depends on the nature of your NRG site and the type of academic or private practice GI that might be in that area. So at an academic center, there's likely a GI investigator like Dr. Schoen and myself who's interested in this, and you could contact the chief or the chair of the GI division for help. We've done this, and we've actually been able to identify several people, several investigators within a group that might be interested in the trial and have met with the NRG folks and have really made this connection happen. In more of a private practice setting, there are lots of ways to identify the prominent or larger GI groups, and my recommendation is just to contact their offices directly. They likely have repositories of patients or data files that they keep in order to keep track of patients and bring them back for colonoscopy that they may be able to utilize to find potential participants. So how do we appeal to these practices? Why is a gastroenterologist going to want to participate? So if it's an academic center, really the academic interest, the research interest might be the main draw. So we have a GI investigator working group from various GI investigators across the trial sites, and we meet quarterly at least, and we sort of discuss the trial and talk about the progress of the trial. And of course, a lot of these investigators have their own research staff and they need funding, so this makes sense. In a private practice setting, first of all, there's lots of people in private practice setting that also have interest in clinical trials. They also may have their own research staff, some of the larger trials, and they may be interested in payment to sort of screen for enrollment for studies. So I think no matter what, you have to kind of pick how you're marketing it, but I think there's interest both ways. So if you're approaching a GI practice and they're wondering why should you participate, the first thing is, as Dr. Schoen mentioned, the ideal follow-up interval for this study population is unknown. So this is a huge question that needs to be answered. If the practices are worried, like, hey, you're telling me I'm doing less colonoscopy, so they may say, well, I don't want to do that because that's how my business as a practice operates. Really, only a small percentage of patients will ultimately be enrolled, so I really don't think this is affecting a bottom line, and like I said, it's very important. And if they're worried about insurance, I mean, we've had these discussions before. The guidelines now state that the surveillance interval for 1 to 2 small adenomas is 7 to 10 years. That's based off data that's observational and actually still the reason we're doing this trial. But we've been telling people and reassuring them that insurance will likely still cover the 5 years exam for the patients that are randomized into the 5-year arm. So will there be interest? I can tell you that yes. I mean, already we've started this on our own site and patients are signing up. So that's always a great sign. So this is my summary slide. Really, the critical key to success for this particular trial is to really identify a GI practice or practices to work with in order to recruit patients into the trial. All right, with that, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Schoen. Thank you.
I realize, of course, Jeff and I have been making these presentations many, many times over the preceding months, and we kind of assume you all know what FORTE really is, and maybe that is an assumption we shouldn't make. The trial is taking people with 1 or 2 non-advanced adenomas and randomizing them to come back at 5 and 10 years versus 10 years. And that is the crux of the matter. When do we need to bring people back? What I thought I would touch on now is how NRG can help you with the FORTE trial. And I don't know why this doesn't, there we are. The first thing I want to say is, in partnership with the NCI and the Division of Cancer Prevention and NRG and NCORE, we are doing some very creative new things in this trial to facilitate your potential interest and participation. For example, we recognize that there's a bit of a startup that's required to get this rolling, and in fact, we've created something called a network fee, which is a $5,000 startup fee, which is available to centers. And there's an application form. It's relatively simple, 1 or 2 pages. You do have to describe how you're going to go about doing this trial, what population you have available. But I can tell you we've had at least 5 or 6 approved networks already, many of whom have already received the money, and we have applications coming in all the time. They sent me an application just yesterday to take a look at, which I haven't done yet, I might add. But that's kind of a startup fee. In terms of recruitment, the trial is kind of interesting in the sense that you can have someone who has a polyp, they had a colonoscopy today, they have the right adenoma, you can approach them for enrollment. But we've also allowed people to go back retrospectively, to go back a few years ago. If you had a polyp within 4 years that qualifies, 1 or 2 of these polyps, then you too can be approached. And we call that the prospective enrollment, the people who are happening now, and the retrospective enrollment, people who had these polyps within 3 or 4 years. Now, how would you find those people? That's always an issue. The reason why it's important is that expands our pool for enrollment and means we could potentially reach our endpoint sooner. But you have an issue of, okay, how do I find these people? And the answer is, we've also partnered with this outfit called Pieces, which is a natural language processing company. And they have a lot of experience working with health centers. And if, let's say, as Jeff mentioned, a practice has been doing colonoscopy for years, they have literally potentially thousands of people that have been scoped in the last 3 or 4 years. And NLP can partner with those either practices or institutions, get the reports, analyze them, and then potentially give them back to help the site identify who is potentially eligible. Pieces is a very experienced outfit. I have been very impressed with how they work. They know how to work with IT folks. They speak the IT language. They speak the HIPAA language. They'll be able to facilitate this process. So what is Pieces going to do? Pieces is going to take all these colonoscopy and pathology reports. They're going to crunch them for you and then tell you, okay, here are the people who are potentially eligible for you to contact. So you see how they make work much less for you because they focus your work on people who are truly eligible. Another thing that I want to reiterate is the funding for the trial. We have negotiated very intensely with the NCI. They have agreed that we pay for every person that's enrolled $1,500. We also have a $150 payment for the blood specimen, a $150 payment for the stool specimen, and $100 per year per patient per follow-up. I can tell you that we've implemented this at the University of Pittsburgh since February. The trial opened, the first enrolled patient was in February. We are up to 97 as of today. At Pittsburgh, we've enrolled about 36, maybe something like that. And I can tell you, it's working very well. We are able to, people are interested, people are signing up, and we're developing mechanisms to facilitate that process. We've also done something unusual. Normally, you would think that there's an economy of scale. That is, the more people you enroll, the less we'd have to pay you because you've got a system all set up and you've got it rolling. Well, in fact, we're doing the opposite. The more people you enroll, the more you will be paid per patient. And that's a very simple calculus on our part. We want sites to be active, to be going at this hard. And what we're saying is the more you enroll is the more we'll pay you per patient. Again, I think something that's precedent setting and certainly different than ever been done previously. In terms of the clinical operations staff, and you're going to hear from our superb people that are working in clinical ops, they have spent a lot of time developing brochures, pamphlets, strategies. We have plans to share ideas across sites, establish best practices to help direct you all and the trial to success. Jeff mentioned we have a separate group for GI investigators. We've had several meetings. We have another one scheduled in the end of the summer. And this is a way for our maintaining enthusiasm, interest in the GI investigators and helping them to facilitate participation. So in conclusion, we have really set up a lot of mechanisms to make FORTE work for you all. And I strongly encourage you to avail yourself of those. Let me turn it on over to Cheryl. No. Oh, we're going virtually now. Okay, great. So allow me to introduce the staff from Park Nicollet or Metro Minnesota Community Oncology. They are very active in the trial, and I thought it'd be great to give a first-person account of what's happening at the center level. So thank you.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Are you able to hear me?
We can hear you, Jody.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So good afternoon. My name is Jody, and I'm the coordinator for the FORTE study at Metro Minnesota. And I'd like to thank Kristen and the FORTE staff for the opportunity to share how we operate with FORTE at our sites. So today I'm going to run through where to begin to identify patients, what to say to patients, and how to build a referral network and keep your providers engaged. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about some barriers that I encountered. So our first step was to reach out to our GI department heads. We sent out a quick introduction of the study and talked about myself. We kept the introduction brief. The shorter the email, the better the chances they're not going to skip over it in their emails. And this email, we also asked to set up a meeting to discuss the study in further detail. We also let them know that the study is not going to take up their time and that study staff will take care of everything. So once you get the GI head on board, we ask that they send out an email to the rest of their department. That email will ask each provider permission to contact their patients. I keep a spreadsheet of those providers that were emailed in order to keep track of who consented to us to contact their patients. Our next step was to reach out to the pathology department and obtain a list of patients that meet the study criteria. From this list, I do a detailed screening. If the patient meets the eligibility, we send a letter out to them. One thing to think about here is how are you going to obtain your consent? Are you going to mail out the paper version, or are you able to use an electronic consent? We use RedCap, and I think that works really well. And also, how are you going to keep track of these patients? We use a system called Credit to keep track of it. We created a letter that we sent out to the patients, and these are the key points that we put in our letter. And I know this letter is now available on CTSU, but we introduced the study. We used the GI doctor's name. We let them know that their GI doctor gave us permission to contact them. We kept the letter brief. People just tend to glance at their mail if they don't really know what it is. Give the key points, make sure that your contact information is clear on there so they're not searching for it, and also to use a direct line to your coordinator. Patients don't want to be on hold if they're calling and they're not really sure what they're calling about. So after I send out the letter, I wait about a week or two to contact them by phone. With all the spam calls nowadays, people may not answer, but it helps if you are calling. If you have caller ID and it comes from the clinic, there's a good chance that they'll answer the phone. I just quickly introduce myself and let them know why I'm calling. I just say, hi, this is Jody from Park Nicollet Research. How are you? Just calling to follow up on a letter we sent out about a clinical trial for colonoscopies. Then I give them a quick elevator speech. I let them know what this study is, why it's being done, what's required of them. And I also let them know that there's really not a lot they need to do to participate in the study, so it's not going to take up a lot of their time. If they have any interest, I ask permission to email them a copy of the consent to review. And then I ask them either to email me back or call me back and let me know what they think. After each contact with a patient, I document the results of the contact. For example, if they declined, why, or if a consent was emailed to them, or any personal information I get from them to help me personalize the next contact I have with them. Some patients I never hear back from, even after I try reaching out to them a few times. Here are two of the most common questions I get when I'm talking to the patients. I hear these two. My doctor said that I need to have one in 5 years. I just reply with, there is study criteria that you must meet and be considered low risk, and your GI provider feels that you meet these criteria and it would be okay for you to participate. And the other top one I get is, what if I get put in the 10-year group and end up with colon cancer because I did not have my 5-year? I let them know that the study colonoscopy schedule is for surveillance purposes only, If you develop any symptoms or concerns, your doctor can absolutely order you a colonoscopy. And then building the referral and network, it's important to build that referral network and to keep your providers involved. I suggest starting small with one site. So once you get that one provider on board, you're able to pull them in to answer questions from other providers and let them know that they are on board with the study. Keep them informed with follow-ups on any study progress. Let them know that you really appreciate their participation. And if you're able to attend any of their meetings, I would go. The more they see your face, the more they will remember the study. Also, you may have them put brochures in the office or even ask your providers if they would be willing to give that patient the brochure at the time of the appointment. Here are the few of the barriers that I've encountered. Majority of the patients, this is number one, is they would only do it if they can be guaranteed to be in the 5 and 10-year group. My second barrier is patients not answering the phone call or returning phone calls when I call them. And then keeping track of multiple patients, like did they get their study blood draw done? Did they get their kit? Did they return them? So once you start getting a lot of patients on study, it's helpful to find a way to keep track of what each patient has completed. So what I did is I made an Excel sheet to keep track of my patients. Did they fill out their um, questionnaires? When is their next blood draw? Was a kit sent to them? Did they send me their contact information? And then I also have on there, are they in the 5 and 10 group or are they just in the 10-year group? So it's a quick glance and easy to look at without having to scroll through each individual patients. And that is all I have.
Sorry. Hello and good afternoon. I hope you all are having a wonderful time at NRG 2022. I was just waiting for my slides and there they are. I'm Cheryl Liao. I am the FORTE Education and Communication Specialist, and I joined NRG just a few months ago to help with FORTE participant recruitment and retention. So today I'm going to talk to you about site materials for patient recruitment, communications activities, and also social media. So as Jody mentioned previously, you know that one of our big challenges when it comes to enrolling for patients is getting the patients themselves involved. So here we have a list of patient-directed materials that NRG staff have developed for participant recruitment and enrollment. These are all very useful to use during the consenting process, and I'll just kind of talk through them quickly today. The first couple of items are really useful in the kind of referral and recruitment phase. We have the patient letter and the endoscopist script. The patient letter is CIRB approved. You actually saw it in Jody's presentation. This was developed in partnership with that site and is used to mail to potentially eligible patients based on previous colonoscopies that they've had, with contact information encouraging them to reach out to you if they are interested in participating in FORTE. The next item is the endoscopist script. The endoscopist script is very useful when talking to GI physicians about how to introduce FORTE to their patients who have had a potentially qualifying colonoscopy. I will talk about the FAQs on the next slide. So the participant contact card and I am on FORTE card are next on the list. These are kind of small, I would say 4-inch cards that you can print out and distribute to your patients once they have been enrolled, consented, and of course randomized into each of their arms. The participant contact card has a little thank you and study coordinator contact information on it so that you can give it to the patient for them to remember that they are participating in the trial and what they're responsible for. The I am on FORTE card is actually for a patient to give to their physician to inform them that they are participating in the trial, and also has study coordinator contact information in case the physician has any questions about their patient's participation. The next item is the stool kit shipping instructions. This is about 2 pages long and is a very detailed set of instructions for the patient on how to collect their stool sample and mail it to the site that is collecting it with NRG. The patients are using the OmniGene Gut Kit, so it's really helpful to have these detailed instructions for your participants to review. The last couple of items on here are the patient webpage and the patient brochure. This can be found online at nrgoncology.org/forte. It contains information about the study, the brief study description, some FAQs, and the clinicaltrials.gov website in case anybody is interested in looking at that. So to move on to the FORTE participant FAQs, this document was developed by NRG staff to help answer many questions that patients have when looking to enroll into the FORTE trial. This helps answer questions during the recruitment and consenting phase of NRG CC005. It covers information about the study, what it is, why it's being done. It covers eligibility criteria, costs and benefits associated with the trial. And actually on the bottom left, which is the bottom of the first page of the document, you can see there's a statement about the patient not being prohibited from receiving a colonoscopy for care purposes, as Jody mentioned, and that not only can we not prohibit them from receiving a colonoscopy for clinical purposes, but also that that does not prohibit them from continuing to participate in NRG CC005. Now, to answer the question where you can find these materials, all of these materials are on CTSU. All you need to do is go to NRG CC005 after logging in, go to the Documents tab, find the CIRB approved documents, and look for post date the 16th of May, 2022. We also have summary sheets for these documents on CTSU in case you need a reminder about what each of these are. All of these documents have been CIRB approved, but do make sure that you follow your local guidelines on getting them approved by your local IRBs based on your site's recommendation. Moving on to some tools for participant retention. As we know, getting patients into a study is only the first step. You got to make sure that they follow through with each of their visits and all the follow-up criteria. So we are developing materials at NRG to help remind your patients that they are participating in the trial. This includes the birthday flyer, anniversary letter template, and also a follow-up flyer to remind them that they have a follow-up call coming up soon. All of these are used as ways to let your patients know that you are thinking of them outside of when you need them for a follow-up. Now to pivot to some of the communications activities. We often release updates about the FORTE trial on CTSU. This includes press releases, a newsletter, a quarterly newsletter that we have, and also different memos. You can find all of these also on CTSU. Again, go to NRG CC005, the Documents section, look for under the Protocol-Related Documents tab, and click Supplemental. The FORTE newsletter, we just released the first edition a few weeks ago. It contains things like accrual updates, different articles about what's going on with the study, and also contact information if you have any questions. The NRG newsletter is another great place to find updates about the FORTE trial. We submit an article every month to the NRG newsletter, and these are often emailed out, so you can definitely find these available to find updates about what's going on with FORTE. And additionally, as I'm sure you all have heard many times already this week, we are active across social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We really appreciate if you would follow, share, like, comment, all of the different engagement activities across these platforms. We really encourage also your sites, if they are active on social media, to share the content that is on the FORTE accounts with their networks, because this is how we're going to find GI practices and patients who are interested in participating in FORTE. Here you can see some of the content that you can find across social media. You can also see that we share education materials about cancer prevention, about clinical trials. We highlight different national healthcare events. We also highlight recruitment milestones, and we'll be excited to share when we hit the 100 patient mark soon. And also share when different events, conferences, abstracts, posters, presentations that involve FORTE come around. So, just to wrap up, we will be available today at the NRG reception, but also at the FORTE reception that's happening, I think, at 5 today. And Please feel free to stop any of us if you want to talk about the FORTE study. Additionally, if you have any questions, the virtual crowd especially, we haven't forgotten about you. The CCD is available for any questions about the FORTE staff. Please feel free to contact us at the contact information listed. We're available Monday through Friday at regular business hours. So thank you so much for your attention today, and I will turn it over to Isabella to talk about data management.
Hello, my name is Isabella Frack, and I am a data manager for this study, and I will talk shortly about the data collection and some forms in RAVE we have. Participants are randomized via open. The eligibility checklist contains questions to ensure the participant is eligible for the study. Baseline pro questionnaires can be completed by the participant via Vision Tree or via paper. This is indicated by the site when the participant is randomized. If participant prefers Vision Tree, the email address of the CRA must be entered into the checklist. After randomization, an email will be sent to the CRA for instructions on how to register the participant in Vision Tree. If using Vision Tree, participant will receive a welcome email once registered to the FORTE study, and then random reminders to complete the baseline forms until the time that forms are due, which will be within 30 days. Participant can log in and complete forms from home or in the office at the site. If the participant completes via Vision Tree, the pro cover sheet in RAVE will become partially completed and responses pushed into the questionnaires from Vision Tree. The cover sheet is to be completed by the site in RAVE after the participant completes the questionnaires in Vision Tree. CRA must answer 2 questions on this cover sheet. Person completing this form and in what language were the questionnaires completed. Do not answer the question, specify method of participant completing questionnaires when the participant will complete via Vision Tree. This response will be populated by the system. Participants should be contacted if questionnaires were not done 30 days after randomizations. Questionnaires in Vision Tree will not be available after 45 days. If that happens, the participant will have to complete on paper. If the participant completes the questionnaires on paper, the CRA must indicate the method and language on the pro cover sheet and manually enter the questionnaire responses on the forms that roll out. Stool collection. Stool is collected at baseline, 24-month, 48-month time points. Sites are expected to generate the PDF transmittal questionnaire within 30 days of participant randomization and sent via mail with the stool kit to the participant. To generate this PDF, go to Transmittal Forms folder in RAVE, as shown on the screen. Select Correct Time Point Stool folder. Complete the biospecimen transmittal form and click Save. This will generate a PDF document as shown on the slide as well. PDF is sent to participant along with stool collection kit and stamped pre-addressed envelope to return to the site. Participant sent transmittal page along with stool sample to NRG Oncology Biobank in Columbus. Participant completes remaining questionnaires pages and sent back to site. CRA enters responses into RAVE. And to summarize, stool questionnaire and dietary questionnaire must always be generated from metadata RAVE, can only be completed by the participant via paper, and responses must manually be entered by the site into metadata RAVE. Thank you for your attention.
So I want to thank all of the presenters, but since we have some time, perhaps some questions. So who has it open in our audience? So for those that have it opened, and I know some of you, so thank you. Have you started accrual, or are you in sort of the ramp up process? And can you use the microphone? I won't name you, but thank you.
Hi, yeah, so we just opened it really a couple weeks ago, and we're still sorting through the IT challenges of identifying the retrospective cohort. I did want to ask if there any way or that you've all had success identifying prospectively through some of the GI software that's available. I can't remember the name. I'm not a gastroenterologist, but several of these softwares that are commonly used.
Oh, Provation?
That's the one.
Yes. So are you talking about sort of how to approach prospective recruitment?
Yeah. Is there any way that's been automated, identifying candidates through that software?
We haven't investigated that on our side. Rocky may be able to speak to this a little bit more.
I don't know if my mic is on. The problem with Provation is it documents the colonoscopy report, but it doesn't document the pathology report. So you always have to merge those two. That is, what happened at the colonoscopy and what, in fact, was found at pathology. So the pathology becomes the kind of the critical, decision point, if you will. And so you can't use Provation alone for the, in order to identify prospective applicants. It was interesting you saw that Sue mentioned at Park Nicollet that they really went through the pathology department to identify adenomas and then use that to try to identify eligible subjects.
We're trying as best we can to limit some of the workload for the coordinators, trying to avoid them screening, as many as we can. And along the same lines, trying to identify that retrospective cohort. We have some tools, eMERS and TriNetX. We've done some carries, but they've not been as successful. So if there are other sites using those that are shareable, some of those formulas, I think we would be interested.
Yes, absolutely. That's the kind, the trial has just begun. We're really in our infancy stages at this point. And those kind of best practices are things that we plan to share across sites. Certainly Pieces, the NLP company, potentially would be something, if you can work out the IT hurdles, they can take the colonoscopy and the pathology reports, crunch them really overnight, and spit out, here are the ones that we think are eligible. Not every one of them is going to be correct, but the vast majority of them will be, and it will greatly reduce your workload.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jordan.
If you're looking for the application for patients, if you're interested, it's on the CTSU website.
And to repeat, although you're pretty loud, but in a good way. No, the Pieces information, the software information is on the CTSU website.
And I'll just add one more thing. What we've been doing at Pittsburgh is, if your gastroenterologists or endoscopists know about this, they're reviewing pathology and sending patients pathology results. So for example, if I do a case and they have 2 adenomas, I'll actually inform the patient right when I'm doing their pathology letter, here's your pathology, this is the recommended follow-up interval, by the way, we have a study, and then I'll send that information right along to the coordinator. So it doesn't solve the retrospective problem, but actually going forward, that's another way that you can kind of find patients up front.
Dr.
Yes.
Hudson.
Hi, Matt Hudson, NCOR of the Carolinas. I'm sure you've already dealt with this issue previously, but I'd like you to elaborate on any distinctions between the retrospective and the prospective cohorts and what you might have to control for in your subsequent analyses.
Oh, here, Greg is hopped up, eager to respond.
So Hannah Bandos is the protocol statistician, but I'll speak to this question. We are stratifying for whether the patients are being prospectively randomized or retrospectively randomized with a 2-year cutoff. So if they're within 2 years of their qualifying colonoscopy, they're in one cohort, and if they're in 2 to 4 years from their qualifying colonoscopy, they're in another cohort, and the analysis will be stratified by that.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to share barriers in either opening or accrual? Any other questions?
I'm just going to make one more comment. And, one of the big unknowns when we launch the trial is, will people agree and be interested in enrolling? I'm a gastroenterologist. For me, doling out another colonoscopy is just routine. It doesn't mean that much to me. But the truth is that to patients it does matter. And we are finding that many people are eager to participate in determining the question, should they come back at 5 and 10 versus 10. Many people are happy to be randomized to 10. They're like, thank God I don't need that 5-year one. That process, that discovery process, is one that I think we should embrace, not think that we know the answer. We don't know the answer, and this is why we need to do these kind of trials.
And for those of you that are young, the colonoscopy is a nice sleep. The prep is a nice nightmare.
There is a virtual question, apparently.
Oh, great.
Okay, I think my microphone's on.
It is.
Okay, good. So the question from our virtual audience is physician consent to contact a blanket consent retrospectively and prospectively? The second part of the question is, it may be difficult convincing GI docs to recommend 10 years after finding 2 8 to 9 millimeter adenomas. How can we help assuage those concerns? Rocky.
Okay, I'll take the first part, which was, remind me?
It was consent to contact, is physician
Yes.
consent to contact a blanket consent retrospectively and prospectively?
That is how we've been implementing it. So I can say at Pittsburgh, we sent out a message about the trial to each of the gastroenterologists, and I don't want to even limit to gastroenterology. There are surgeons who do endoscopy, and we've approached them as well, and they count. It's all endoscopists. And if they agree to participate, it is a blanket consent for all their patients. So that's the first part.
Yeah, the second part was about how to approach gastroenterologists who are maybe hesitant to recommend or have a patient participate in an arm with an extended follow-up interval. This is a tough question. What you may not know is that a polyp that reaches the size of 10 millimeters or 1 centimeter automatically gets you into a 3-year follow-up. So we're talking about the difference between 8 and 9 versus 10. You could say those are very small intervals. How do you know it's not 8, 9, 10, is 9, 10, et cetera? And I mean, I would respond with uncertainty with uncertainty. We don't know the answers to these questions, and that's exactly why we're doing this trial. There's lots of observational data. Dr. Schoen has done some of this work that suggests that these patients are low risk, but no trial to actually confirm their risk. So, our response to that sort of inquiry would be say, well, the guidelines would say, recently said 5 to 10, more recently say 7 to 10. So why don't we figure this out? We can, approach that gastroenterologist and therefore their patient with the randomization will help us understand which one of these arms is the most appropriate for these patients.
Thank you.
Hi, Melissa Faust from Upstate Carolina NCORE. Our PI, Amy Curtis, is asking, of the patients already enrolled, how many are 2 to 4 years past, and how easy is it to enroll those patients compared to the prospective patients?
I don't know those numbers off the top of my head. I can tell you that at least the strategy we've taken in Pittsburgh was to begin with not going way back in time. We figured, let's start with the easier group. Now, I understood some people said, oh, but then you're losing people because the 4 years is expiring. And my feeling was we needed to get our site up and running, get a workflow, get people enrolled, and then we'll more assertively attack the retrospective. So I'm not, the bottom line on this trial is there are many, many potentially eligible subjects. There's no shortage of that. The real key is get your site up and running, and then, you can deal with how far back you want to go. But so for example, on my site, I don't think we have anyone who's more than 2 years back just yet. But at other sites, it may be different. They took the approach of, I don't want to lose any eligibility. I'm going to start with the retrospectives.
I,
can quickly respond to the question. I'm Hannah Bendis, and thank you, Greg, for covering the first question. But regarding the timelines right now, there's about 50-50 of like 40%, 60%. It changes every month because we're starting to accrue, but there's about like half and half of retrospective. Oh, I guess less than 2 years or greater than 2 years of the distance.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry. One hesitation I have, and I know you've said that insurance shouldn't be an issue because, you know, people are getting colonoscopies at 5 years, at 10 years, but with the U.S. Preventative Task Force changing the recommendations, and just experience with another trial where the insurance denied, I'm just wondering, has anyone had that issue? You know, have you heard of that issue anywhere? And how do you plan to handle it if that does become an issue? Because patients won't know right away because you're enrolling them so far prior to them having the issue with the insurance.
Right. It's a very good question. We don't have all the answers right now, and I too was involved in a trial a number of years ago in the 1990s where recommendations changed and we were in the midst of a trial and we had to work around it. But let me make a couple of points. First of all, the recommendation for serrated adenomas is still 5 to 10 years, for example. Secondly, there are a myriad of reasons that the the surveillance recommendations are altered. If you have a family history less than 60, you bring people back at 5. You know, if you have 2 first-degree relatives, that changed. So there, if the prep wasn't very good, you might bring them back. So there's all these issues. And the truth is, insurance companies are not in the business of policing this at that level of detail. And it is fully my expectation that that's going to remain the case. Now, you are right. The earliest that we're going to get our first repeat is in a few years. And who knows what's going to happen 4 or 5 years from now. So it's difficult to predict these things. But for a lot of very sound reasons, we don't think this is going to be a killer for the trial. We have had some sites that, you know, oh, the insurance will never allow this. You know, I beg to differ, knowing what I know about the huge variabilities that occur in colonoscopy surveillance. I don't know if Jeff wants to make additional comment.
Yeah, I mean, we really don't know what's going to happen because it hasn't actually happened yet. The other thing I'll just mention is we did obtain a statement of support for the trial from the 3 major GI societies saying that this trial is important to be conducted. So I don't know if that insurance company will be amenable to hearing that, to say, oh, well, then go ahead, here's your 5-year colonoscopy. But we have several things in our armament of tools to kind of make that appeal. And I agree with Dr. Schoen. I don't think there's going to be that level of granularity. That's great.
We welcome you. 2 more virtual questions.
2 more virtual questions. First one, they stated, here in Maine, we are facing a lot of resistance from the private practice GI group. So she has started to reach out through primary care docs who are very excited to try to identify and enroll patients. Is anyone else using this approach? So I don't know if anybody in the audience has thought about approaching primary care docs, or anybody virtually that has approached primary care docs. But she was asking if anybody else.
If I could just comment.
Please.
I think it would be better to have the GI docs on board. And I can tell you that Jeff and I are open to having conversations with practices that are out there. We certainly understand the landscape, the economic considerations, but I think that we can present this in a way, and I think, look, not everybody, we know that, but give us a chance, and I think we're going to have some great success.
Okay, and one more question, and this one is, after randomization, particularly if done through primary care, will study coordinators update change health maintenance reminders in the EHR? That's a site issue. I would think that's something you would be updating at the site level. So however you handle that for other studies, you do it for this.
Jeff has a
Yeah,
comment.
that is something, I can just speak for our side, that is something we're doing. We use an EPIC EHR, there's a health maintenance reminder for colonoscopy, and when we generate the patient letters to be sent out to both the gastroenterology provider and the primary care provider about their patient being enrolled, we go ahead and update the health maintenance to go ahead and say they're due for a 5-year surveillance exam or the 10-year surveillance exam. So I imagine that something similar exists throughout the EHR systems throughout the country, and that's what we recommend doing as a best practice, yes.
One final item for myself is just to remind everybody that the clinical coordinating department is answering questions for this study. We have a 1-800 number you can call, which is 1-800-477-7227, or you can email us at the FORTE email address, which is FORTE, F-O-R-T-E, @energyoncology.org.
And I would like to invite everyone sitting here for some social hour at 5 p.m. today, I believe at the Plaza East. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. So the Plaza East is a nice area of this hotel. Been there before.
Yes, we'll be having the FORTE reception with some hors d'oeuvres, so please come join us.
Pre-dinner.
Pre-dinner, yes.
Pre-dinner. Thank you to all of you on behalf of the entire study team, and for those of you in the audience that do not have it open, please, please, please. This is a very, very important prevention study. Dr. Ford is here from the NCI, a great collaboration, but we're also under the gun to get this accrued to in a timely fashion. So if you need any help, please reach out to any of us and we can work with your site directly. Thank you.